Talk of Gremlins 3 and Goonies 2 has floated around so long that I don't even flinch every time there's a supposed update anymore. Hell, there's probably been talks of those two sequels longer than a lot of listeners out there have even been on this earth. They become the sequels that are always talked about but never happen. Goonies 2 talk only seems to pop up every time Corey Feldman is in the news, but it's easily dismissed as talks have been on and off for, well, shit, since the original film. They've been talking about a sequel, but I mean, a legit sequel actually happening. It's been at least longer than the original DVD commentary over a decade ago that actually sparked any real possibility of a Goonies 2 coming to fruition. Gremlins 3, on the other hand, has had some possibility behind it, as it was consistently discussed in the news by nearly all the major players involved with the first two films, and all of them confirming that another one was gonna happen sooner or later. Later seeming to be the probability, if ever. I'd almost given up on a Gremlins 3 at all happening in the near future, despite the idea cropping up every time the creatures are used in a commercial or referenced somewhere in a film, or Zach Galligan is at some convention and asked about it, or Joe Dante talks about it at a screening, what have you. Gremlins is one of my favorite films, like in my top 5, if not top 3 of all time. Chris Columbus, though, who wrote the original film, who actually went on to be a renowned filmmaker in his own right, was talking to Metro US recently and caused a bit of a stir that to this point had been avoided when it came to a possible third Gremlins film. Till now, it was fairly clear or implied that the third film would be just that, a Gremlins 3. Surely not wanting to fall into the reboot issues that movies like Nightmare on Elm Street and Ghostbusters and Friday the 13th and other films from that same era suffered. Now, though it appears that Chris Columbus is not only still working on it, as he has stated in the past, but he more or less insists that Warner Brothers is actively trying to get a reboot greenlit, pun intended if you want to. I would be more than jovial about this news, considering I'm a huge Gremlins fan, like I said. But why a reboot? So anyway, this is what Columbus had to say to Metro US. When asked if there's an update on Goonies 2, he said, "There's been talk of it. That's a difficult one, only because all of the actors have gotten older and chosen different careers, so that's a little more difficult. Gremlins, we are actively talking about that. So that's what I'm working on with my production company, 1492 Pictures." Metro US goes on to ask if it will be a reboot, and he states it will almost definitely be a reboot. Metro US then says that's understandable, like so many of your films, it is timeless. Columbus then says that was the goal on the films that have worked and have stood the test of time. There was definitely an intention to make them timeless. Even when we were making Home Alone, I was saying to the crew, I hope when people are watching this on TV in 30 years, that this still feels fresh. You are a product of the time you shoot the movie. So there are a few things that give away what year it was. But there is a timeless quality, which starts with the story, which you know has emotional connection to the audience, that you know will continue through generations. But then there's production design, visual design, and making sure that it is appealing. There's a certain appeal to those films that helps retain a certain freshness. Okay, nothing in that makes me feel that we need a Gremlins reboot. Especially one that takes away the tongue-in-cheek humor, considering that there's reports that the new version is going to be gruesome and a dark horror film, not like the one we know today. It is interesting for what it is to see where it started to where we got to the finished film as far as the original script goes. Since then, though, there have been a ton of ripoffs, and a lot of what was in the script has really been done elsewhere. At least it can be said that the darker version of the Little Monsters Run Amok genre has been done several times over. So why take away one of the things that made Gremlins so unique? Joe Dante, the director of Gremlins and Gremlins 2, his humor and the changes that Spielberg and the others brought to the table in the first two Gremlins are essential to what made those movies stand out from the numerous rip-offs. I don't want CGI Gremlins. I don't want a major redesign. I don't need a new Gizmo or Billy. I just don't need it. I'd rather not have a Gremlins reboot than have any new Gremlins at all or whatever. I know there's going to be some who are going to like, why don't you give it a chance and all that kind of stuff. How do you know it's going to be bad? Look, for those of you who want to know, I know because of things like Nightmare on Elm Street and Ghostbusters and the other needless remakes that do nothing but try and cash in on the nostalgia of the original without standing on their own and in any way deserves any merit. If you're going to go for cheap nostalgia, then just give me a sequel. I'll take another Dumb and Dumber 2 over another Beauty and the Beast, Friday the 13th, Footloose, Point Break, or any other pointless reboot. It's tiresome. I said this before, but it has relevance here, and that is, in the home video age, the reasons the studios want to do reboots or remakes is, let's just face it, that's what they are. They're remakes. Reboot is just a buzzword. The reasons why they want to do those in most cases are the same reasons that the audience rejects them. The best remakes are those that are films that didn't live up to the potential they had originally or didn't age gracefully. It doesn't necessarily mean that movies that are older or may have some special effects that didn't live up to today's standards aren't still relevant. They are. And you can't try and remake those movies. People will reject them. Like The Fly, The Thing, Scarface. You have 24 really bad remakes for every one of those films we get. And it's only getting worse. Warner Brothers, you're making me lose a lot of faith in you. This is not helping at all. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I think I can assume that most of you will agree that there's no reason to reboot Gremlins. None. It's too relevant. It's still in the zeitgeist. I can ask most people what the 3 rules are, and they'd still be able to tell me. Because people know who Gizmo is. They know who Stripe is. They said it in the interview themselves. It's timeless. Yes, Gremlins is a very timeless story. And a lot of that was not Chris Columbus. I'll be honest. It was Joe Dante. It was Steven Spielberg. It was all the people that brought the Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life influence to the film, and again, made it more dark humor instead of just dark. I mean, Gizmo turns into a gremlin halfway through the original script. It was Steven Spielberg who made Gizmo who he is. What do you guys think of this? I'm going off the rails a little bit here, but this is one of those things that genuinely gets me upset, and I don't get too emotional when it comes to this kind of stuff unless it's something that really hits home. And this is one that just, what the fuck, guys? I mean, I'm sure a lot of you out there know what I mean when I say Gremlins is one of those movies I can recite verbatim. I've seen it so many times. Shit. I mean, the original script is very unique. I'll give it that, but you know, it's a far cry from what we got. I mean, in the original script, you got Gremlins eating the dog after midnight to turn into Gremlins in the first place, cutting off Billy's mom's head and rolling it down the stairs when he gets home. Just all kinds of stuff like that. It's, you know, and the other famous scene is they go into a McDonald's and they don't touch the hamburgers, but they eat the people. I mean, the dark humor was there in that original script, but Spielberg's like, well, you can't get a mass audience into a movie like this, but if we tweak this, we change this. Same thing with like Joe Dante. He brought his dark humor to the table, and the Looney Tunes influence and all kinds of other things, and it just was this perfect storm of a movie that managed to stand up to Ghostbusters the same weekend they came out. They came out together, and both did very, very well. And not often do you have 2 films that go on to be blockbusters like that open back to back. Of course, in this market, it's almost impossible for that to happen in a lot of cases, but just the same. And Gremlins was also, you know, not a real light film either, don't get me wrong. It's one of the reasons we have the PG-13 rating today, but it was that fine line between straight up horror and tongue-in-cheek dark comedy. And the second film went even that extra step as far as the comedy and satire. And I would have liked to have seen a third film take it a little bit back more to the darker roots, but I didn't want to see this. I don't want this. What do you guys think? Let me know what you guys think. I'm real interested because, like I said, I'm a huge Gremlins fan, and I want a Gremlins 3, but I don't want a Gremlins reboot. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Have you got a good argument for why there should be a Gremlins reboot? Let me know down in the comments.
With the recent changes to YouTube's monetization policy, we'd like to ask that you please consider supporting the channel through Patreon. As thanks, Patreon members will receive early notification of mini-documentaries, special behind-the-scenes making of the Edge videos, outtakes, bloopers, lost episodes, and more. Support tiers start for as little as $1 a month. Check the link in the description. Thank you.